The big Pokémon leak revealed a lot of concept art for Pokémon that didn't make it into the game, and in this video we're going to look over the unused Pokémon concepts for X and Y, and explain a bit of their design origins, what they are. Also, by the way, thanks to the leak, we now know that Game Freak originally intended for Southern France to be a part of Kalos, but I guess due to time constraints, they had to cut it out. Now Poke Europe is just always going to have a missing sliver. On top of the art itself, most of this XY concept art features design notes, telling us exactly what they are. Like, this is a Cassowary, this is a fiery Flamingo, and this is a poison-type Chameleon? What? Let's start there, because, well, first off, I don't think of chameleons as being European, but it turns out they are. The chameleon lives in Iberia, Cyprus, and other warmer parts of the Mediterranean. While Kalos is based on France, a lot of its native Pokémon are more European in design, rather than France specifically. So it's perfectly fine in that regard. The little one's crest appears to be an exaggerated panther chameleon head though, and notably, these are the ones that tend to go for the wackiest colors too. Definitely a part of this Pokémon. But those eyes... it makes them look kinda like a Zelda enemy. Like a mutated Lizalfos under a spell. Its head crest flaps are so cute and huge, though, and its inner head is so cone-shaped, which it almost makes me think of squid heads and fins, which it could be. The notes right here are saying it attacks by spitting out its poisonous tongue, and we see purple poison liquid flying off of it. So I wonder if it was ever intended to just spit brightly colored poison the way that squid spit ink. Now here's a super important chameleon fact. They are not poisonous or venomous. And unless you are an insect, the entire chameleon branch of the species is harmless to you. In fact, Europe is the only populated continent without venomous lizards at all. That might be a part of why they cut these poison-type Pokémon. They simply do not fit what they are supposedly based on. Plus, the weird swirls on its knees, to match the weirdest swirl of all on its tail, which is secretly its poison sac, thanks to the notes, by the way. And it having these three horns? Kinda like the horned chameleon, but two of them are also big swirls, and then the third one is its chin? Nah. It's neat, but I see why they cut it. And you know, looking ahead, it's funny how many of these cut mon are pointy. The water insect even has the same chin as the chameleon. Tomohiro Kitakaze, whose signature is on most of these, must really like spiky things. But this little guy here is such an iconic little guy. I remember seeing these in pools and creeks constantly growing up. And they go by many names based on where you're from. Boatmen, backswimmers, water bugs, Coryxidae, or as this image puts it, diving beetles, which technically is a different species than the others I mentioned. They're all colloquially referred to in the same ways, though. They look like a tiny silhouette of a small rowboat with oars sticking out. And really, they could fit this Pokémon into any region. These common bugs are found in small bodies of water across the entire globe. But it's the Dinosaur that's found most commonly in Europe, and it's visibly the closest to these Pokémon. It's even dark red like the Pokémon's accents. It's even got the thick back feet and the tiny little up front legs. It's pretty cute. Interestingly, this Pokémon reverses the real-life evolution or metamorphosis that these bugs do. I've been showing you them as adults, but their larvae are often called water tigers, and they have more of the elements we see in this Pokémon's evolution. Mainly the more upright body plan, the longer legs, the hunting method being the same that this image notes the Pokémon doing, and even its large mandibles are going the same route as the horned chameleon's horns earlier, being turned into a big chin. Some even have this separate, more beetle-looking segment on top, just like this mon's body being two segments on top of each other. These water tigers breathe through their butt also, which this upper right note says is how this Pokémon uses the big, long, red tube. It sticks it just above the water surface to breathe. It's like a snorkel to go along with its goggles. This image itself refers to the Evo as a water mantis Pokémon, which... well, there you go. Its eyes look like goggles, it's got the snorkel butt, and it's got the two big mantis grippers to catch prey. It's perfectly mixing these two insects, which is really cool. So why was it cut? Well, no obvious reason this time. It may have just gone the way many beta Pokémon go. Its niche or job gets filled by other, better designs. or it gets saved and reworked for a future generation. The ideas that led to this Pokemon could have also led to Golisopod and or Arachnid the very next generation. It could simply have been that they didn't want a big bug water type just yet. Next is this one, the only one without any text in its art, so we're completely on our own. But it looks like a tiny whale with a large, spiky, pointy rudder and a dish on top? Could you stab it into the ground and have it be a bird bath? Actually, here's an idea. X and Y also introduced Barnacle and Barnacle Pokemon, which famously attach to boats, piers, sea turtles, whales. If it's small enough, which would also be a fun reverse of roles because whales are normally huge, I could definitely see it attaching to other water-type Pokemon, sort of like what Remoraid does with Mantine, only it's actually attached. Maybe they didn't want to introduce 2 new Pokemon that do kind of the same thing, or maybe this design idea is just a bit too silly, even for Pokemon. If it is a whale, it's definitely in the more cartoony, generic sense, rather than a specific species. Though, maybe it could be a minke whale, the most common whale in the oceans around Europe? They're on the smaller side for whales after all, and have particularly straight mouths. Not even curious. What has me curious, though, is how much having a good mattress can improve my overall sleep quality and thus my quality of life. This video is sponsored by Helix Sleep, who wants to match you to a perfect mattress right now. How do you do it online, though? Well, here's my experience. 7 years ago, my wife and I took their easy online sleep quiz, which compiles the data of your sleep preferences and uses that to recommend a mattress or two. We were recommended and thus chose the Helix Midnight Luxe, with its medium support feel and a cooling cover which helps dissipate excess body heat away from the mattress, which I love tremendously. I grew up in a desert and I am sick of heat. Then, through the free shipping, it came to us, vacuum sealed in an easy to move box, so setup was simple. And the cat, oh yes, Sasha, my beloved, she liked the box. And the mattress too, especially when there's treats on it. We've been sleeping a lot better now. Simple as. We got their 100-night sleep trial to make sure we loved it, but I think we settled on, we absolutely do, only a week or so in. You spend at least a third of your life sleeping, so you should be happy with your mattress. And Helix's 10-year warranty makes sure you're happy with it all decade long. And did you know you can get 20% off by going to helixsleep.com/Lockstin? You can use the money I saved you to buy eggs, and then wake up from the best sleep you've had in a while and eat them for breakfast. It's almost like I bought you breakfast. You're welcome, and the link is at the top of the description. Now how about this spooky skull-wearing angry bird? Why are its feet like boots? I don't think we'll be able to get to that, but first, what is it? My initial gut reaction was that it was a heavy metal looking terror bird, especially given the smaller one's beak shape. And that would go along with its head kind of resembling a Stone Age axe. And those elements could still be in play, but actually they are stated to be cassowaries. The text says so. Fire-eating cassowary Pokemon. And it's got the right colors, the right amount of toes, and it's also flightless and has a wrinkly, non-feathery face, and of course, the all-important head crest and neck dingly-danglies, which are called wattles. The text notes state that they eat fire itself and store it in those wattles, and the big one's tail is used to fan flames to make them bigger before it eats it too. The evolved Pokemon most closely resembles the southern cassowary, which is the most common and thus most well-known cassowary, and it's also the 3rd tallest living bird, along with being the 2nd heaviest. The non-evolved one, then, could be a dwarf cassowary, or its very close extinct relative, the pygmy cassowary. It's so dead that the Pokemon have exposed skulls! It's noted that they like to hang out around campfires and bonfires. Perhaps they like to consume it when the people are done with it, or while they're still using it, stealing the campfire like what many birds do with food, not with fire. But actually, what do cassowaries even have to do with fire, let alone eating it? Well, I'll tell you, the Chinese name for cassowary is Siyahuachi, if I'm pronouncing that right, which directly translates to fire-eating chicken. Chicken! The story goes that cassowary are so omnivorous and voracious and dumb that they even ate the burning coals of the explorer's old campfire. After all, an old campfire, all the sticks and the rocks, it looks like a nest. Those burning coals could be eggs. It's gonna eat those eggs. Other media has made this connection too. The Hikui bird in Dragon Ball is a fire-eating cassowary specifically, for instance. But also is just a ball. Also, have you heard them? I I am unhappy with that bird sound. So cassowaries aren't anywhere near Europe. They're found in Australia and Southeast Asia, though France did have colonies nearby, so that could have worked as an excuse to have it. That said though, the whole every Pokemon has to fit the region was only kind of an experimental idea at the time of Gen 6. It really wasn't until Gen 8 that they solidified that all new Pokemon have to fit the region. Now, what do you think? Fire flying type? Or no, because cassowaries are flightless? If fire flying type, could that have been one of the reasons they cut it? Kalos's regional bird Talonflame already got the type combo. And the same potentially goes for the Flamingo too. I remember when these leaks were new, many people were just kinda got sad to see this one, because instead of this, we wound up with this 3 generations later. Personally, I like the simplicity and balloon plastic flamingo-ness of Flamingo, just wanna say. And plus, this old Pokemon is literally like the joke idea a lot of Fakemon creators do. Flamingo is its noted name etymology. Flame, flamenco, flamingo. So it's potentially a fire type flamingo doing flamenco. I've seen so many examples of flame flamingo because flamingo. Heck, I have a flamingo because it's that easy of an idea, though we made ours cooking themed at least. Anyway, it's such a name first, design and lore later kind of Pokemon idea, which is probably why it got cut. Plus, flamingos aren't exactly French, you know? Neither is flamenco dancing. It fits with Europe as a whole, being that it's a very Iberian-style dance, and France is right next to that, so it wouldn't not work. But maybe they already knew they were planning on going to Iberia in the near future. But other than that, this bird fits perfectly along with Kalos and France's beauty and fashion themes, one with the hair feathers, the makeup, the stocking socks, legs, and the high heel feet. There is kind of a lot going on, but I feel like it works. They did ultimately kind of split this Pokemon into both Flamingo and Espathra, the high fashion ostrich with high heels in Paldea though. Though here's an element that neither of those mon have, it's its fancy beak. I like this note. His mouth is like a castanet, and he keeps time with the music. Definitely a flamenco dancer then. Castanets are pretty uncommon instruments, they're not used in a lot of music, but they are almost a defining part of flamenco dancing music. Now we do the peanut! I love this design so much. A peanut dinosaur egg that becomes a peanut-themed Breloom? I love it. It is definitely heavily inspired by the theropod dinosaur Dilophosaurus, especially the highly inaccurate venom-spitting version from Jurassic Park. We see how it can have the 2 head frills more out to the sides, or more pointed back and out of its face, kind of like Jurassic Park's Dilophosaurus. Maybe it's a play on how peanuts are one of the most common and often deadly allergies in the world. And allergies are basically poison if you think about it. Plus, look at the flowers of peanut plants. 2 big petals around a large central stamen enclosed with fused petals. It's quite literally this Pokemon's head. I almost just said head crest there, because on the actual real-life Dilophosaurus, it has 2 keratinous head crests, which, while quite big, were not nearly as large as the head frills in Jurassic Park. But I'm getting lost in the well-actually sauce. So instead of going down that route, let's look at how peanut plants grow leaves. Exactly the same way as the leaves on this dinosaur too. And actually, those petals also kind of resemble 1800s French bonnets, which would later go on to be shorthand for what an old-fashioned grandmother wears in a lot of media, which itself brings us to its pre-evolution, the baby. At first I thought it was just a peanut with a face, but why is the face inside the shell? Is the shell actually acting like a baby wrap or carrier? Only baby's face is sticking out and it's all bundled and protected otherwise. Babies are often depicted with a single tuft of hair right on top too, sometimes with a little bow. And it's a bow, like the 2 leaves. The bow becomes a bonnet when it evolves. It's kind of perfect. Now, do you think it was grass type or grass ground type? Maybe even an early Fossilmon contender, so grass rock. Oh yeah, if you didn't know, peanuts grow in the ground, hence grass ground being what I assume is the most likely type it would have been given. As for why it was cut, it could just be location again. While this concept is brilliant and this design is great, IMO, Dilophosaurus fossils have only been found in North America and China, and peanuts are native to South America, and today, Bulgaria grows 3/4 of all the peanuts in Europe, and it's on the other end of the continent. That said, the French Empire is heavily involved in peanut history. After Spain and Portugal brought peanuts back to Europe, it was French slave colonies in northern Africa that grew most of them for the Europeans. Peanuts are one of the few high-yield crop foods that are able to grow in super sandy soil like in northern Africa. To this very day, North Africa grows a ton of peanuts. It's a staple food there. And I do suppose North Africa is just across the Mediterranean Sea from France, so it's not that far, but maybe Game Freak didn't want to reference the whole French slave colony thing directly. You gotta be careful with topics like that, so often it's best to just cut your ideas and move on. Now, while it did ultimately make it into X and Y, this Beta Florges line is different enough that I still want to talk about them. While they are all still flower fairies, they are a lot less literal than their final designs, which are more nymphy fairies holding on to literal flowers. These early concepts, though, incorporate flower buds and petals into their core design more, and I like the note that the fairy wings are unattached. A clear stylistic choice. They flutter so quickly that they look like a blur, or the connection between the actual wing and their bodies is so dainty and tiny, it's hard to make out with the naked eye. Or perhaps it's just like how fairy and dragonfly wings are drawn in more simple art styles in a bunch of media. Like look at Navi from Zelda. Obviously her wings are attached to her body, but you just can't see that because it's so fine and dainty. Interestingly, there seems to have been some sexual dimorphism planned for Florges, as this alternate design is much more masculine. There's less pink, there's no eye makeup, there's no bootylicious behind, and instead it has a larger front, a big gut with a pink spot. And the very pointy-nosed chin thing again? Their body plan does remind me of seahorses, actually, which, famously, it's the male seahorses who get pregnant and all that. Which could be why the male here has a large belly. And this big upwards hair instead of the long, elegant hair petals of the female brings to mind a lot of typical male elf and fairy hairstyles, which tends to be more fantastically upwards, just like this. Perhaps one of the reasons its design was changed and made to hold flowers and become a bouquet is to more differentiate it from another Gen 6 Pokemon, Dragalge, who is a big, flowy, pretty seahorse sea dragon. It'd be kinda weird for there to be two different lines of leafy sea dragon looking things, you know? Now, in this leak there was also a lot of scrapped alternate designs for Mega Pokemon, but one was actually cut entirely. Mega Jynx. Do I have to tell you why it was cut? It was kind of destined to be cut from the start. Jynx had a bunch of controversy surrounding it in the US, and Game Freak probably simply did not want to deal with that possibility again. Glad to see them repurpose the design for a Alolan Dugtrio, though. The idea behind the design is sound enough. She's always been partly the so-called fat lady in classical opera, with the singing and the breast armor and the golden hair that's long. And now she's just in more modern, fancy, shining singing clothes. There may even be a specific singer or outfit reference that I'm just too myself to know about or be able to find. What would I even search for that? Singing lady with sparkly blue dress. It's not helpful. Final points, quick changes. The concept art of Tyrant had it be much lighter. It's orange and yellow even. It's noted that it needed to change as it was potentially too close to Digimon's mascot, Agumon. Furfrou was originally way fluffier. Mega Houndoom had the original pointed devil's tail, but with a burning cinder design inside of it. It was noted that it was too easily thought of as blood, and so that had to change. Beta Klefki had two crossing keys for eyes, which got changed because they didn't want to evoke the Keys of Heaven, coat of arms from the Vatican. So instead, they gave it a keyhole mouth, as if it had a cleft lip. Oh yes, Klefki has a cleft lip. We actually did a whole video on this, actually. For multiple reasons, Klefki is one of the most French Pokemon, and it's perfect in every way and did not deserve the hate that it got. And you can click here to watch me talk about that. It's absolutely worth your time. Now thanks for watching, and never stop using your noggin.